Hey again, it's Tiana Jones, and I'm back to show you how I paint portraits. First and foremost, I want to let you know that there are plenty different ways to paint. I'm just showing you some of the ways that I've learned over the years. I always start with a gesture drawing to get a gist of where everything needs to be placed on the canvas. Then I go back in with blocks of paint and really focus on the different values and how they create distinct shapes in the face. I start off with just one color, which in this case is raw sienna, and I use mineral spirits to thin out the paint to create the value study that I like. So the thicker the paint, the darker, and the thinner the paint, the lighter. This technique is called grisaille painting. I used to use this technique all the time. It's really good for getting all the shapes and value in from the beginning so you know exactly what the paint is going to look like at the end. Using this technique makes it a lot easier to manipulate the paint from the beginning, with the help of mineral spirits, of course. After that's dry, I go back in usually the next day. It usually takes oil paint about a day to dry, a day or two, but since the first layer is so thin, it might take less than a day, but I always just do a day just to be safe. But yeah, for the next layer, I go back in and add all my dark values. Mostly with oil paint, you need to paint dark to light because it is way easier to get lighter than it is to get darker. And don't be afraid to get those dark values in. I'm telling you, it is way easier to get lighter than it is to get darker. A lot of people completely render small areas at a time, but I like to move around the entire painting as a whole. When drawing, you're mostly taught to move around the entire paper because it's easy to get lost in those small areas and then have one area way more rendered than other areas. So I've kind of continued this practice through my painting. Even though painting is easier to fix if you mess up, I still like to be safe. I always start off with the eyes. I don't know why, everybody just loves eyes. It just really brings the painting to life from the beginning, so you're not as nervous about continuing if you're kind of scared. As you can see, I paint pretty thin, almost super thin. This is not necessarily intentional. I think it's just the paint that I have is not very thick. And I got the Winton Newton. Usually the raw sienna and the burnt umber are the two colors that I use the most. And they're pretty thin. I mean, when you add white, it kind of thickens in a little bit, but most of the time in the beginning layers, you need those darker colors anyways. Painting thin doesn't really bother me because it is easier to manipulate the paint when it's thinner. But I don't like how you can see the canvas through the paint. So that's why I paint in multiple layers. I paint about 2 to 4 layers. Depends on how fast I'm going. Like here, you can see that like pretty much every value and shade is in there. It's just super thinly on there, so it looks transparent like a watercolor and not as opaque as typical oil paintings. So I could almost leave it like so, but right here you can see this is my next layer. This is a different day. This is layer 3, and yeah, I just keep going over it because I don't like those seeps of canvases showing. Okay, as you can see, day 3 again, and I'm doing exactly what I already did. This is a multi-process thing, adding layers on layers on layers. As you can see, I'm painting here with this tiny brush. This painting is only 5 by 5 inches, so it's pretty small. At the beginning stages, I'll paint with a bigger brush because I like the expressiveness that bigger brushes will let you have. But towards the last layers, I use a small brush to get those finer details, refine it a little bit more. Something that I've been working on in my art practice is getting my paintings looser. I feel like I want my paintings to have that expressive feel. I want them to feel like paintings rather than photographs. So if you are an artist and you have any tips for me, please leave them in the comments below, because that is something that I am constantly working on. And I think I am getting better at it, but you can always grow. Also, towards the last layers, I get a little bit more realistic towards the color that the reference is showing. In the beginning layers, I do like to exaggerate the colors a little bit, not like most artists, but again, that's another thing I'm working on, exaggerating color. But yeah, so it's easier to do that towards the beginning, but at the end, I like to get a little bit more realistic, so I just know exactly how it's going to look. One thing that I love about oil paint is that it is so easy to blend because it stays wet so long. So it makes it a lot easier to get realistic color values. You don't really have to mix that many values because you can mix a lot of it on the canvas itself. Now I'm going through and adding the darker values as thick as possible. The lighter values that you mix on your palette don't have to be super accurate because you have the darker values so thickly on there that they usually blend really good once you put it on the canvas. I just thought about this too, but I also paint completely around the canvas and not just in one area because I like to save my brushes. I paint with one color at a time, so I put all the dark values down at once, all the mid-tone values, and then all the light values. This lets me have to clean my brushes less, so they don't get as damaged from cleaning. I use mineral spirits and old t-shirt pieces to clean my brushes off, and I think the cotton from the t-shirts kind of damages the brushes a little bit. It may be because I do get the cheaper brushes, like the ones from Hobby Lobby and stuff. They're the Master's Touch, but I still don't think of course they're not the best brush I can get. Brushes can be up to like $100, $300, but I get like the $10 and $20 ones. And I'm gonna speed this part up because y'all get what I'm saying, hopefully. And you can get a painting done by any means necessary. So often I'll even just use my finger to blend stuff in if I feel like I'll mess it up by using a brush. I always do the hair and the background first because I feel like it's something that's small but makes a big difference. But yeah, that's how I paint a portrait. Oh, sorry I lost my voice there for a minute. So yeah, like and subscribe. Leave any comments if you have any questions, concerns, or suggestions. Thank you.